Hello, welcome back. Right, we've got a little bit of this Scammell Pioneer done. I have an engine, a little bit of the front suspension, a little bit of the chassis at the front, radiator and another couple of bits. I thought this would have gone together really quickly, and when I first opened it and looked at the instructions, I was a little bit disappointed because I thought this isn't going to take me long. And how wrong can you be? Here we go. Let me get this a bit wider for here. Wrong way. There we go. Right, so on here you have, starting at the top, you have the block and the heads to put together, the two heads. It's a Gardner engine, a 102 brake horsepower. The big motors for the time, and they had a lot of torque in them. It looked really easy, and it ain't. So I've put all of this together. I've this piece here, C26, which is, it was an extremely thin piece of plastic. I don't know, can you see that? Yeah, of course you can. And it goes from the fuel pump. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. It goes from the fuel pump. I think it's a vacuum pipe all over the top of the heads and into the air intakes on the other side. So I reckon that's a vacuum pipe, but I could be totally wrong. That, it was so thin it would have broken. It really was, and it was actually a piece that part of this piece here. So what I've done is I've cut it off on both sides and I've replaced it with a soft steel pipe that runs pretty much to the same shape as it. So that's that. There's a lot going on here, a lot of detail in it. Be careful when you're putting this stuff together if you do this kit. The instructions, although they seem fairly precise, fairly accurate, they don't tell you exactly where this stuff goes. Now, if you don't know anything about an engine, you might have a problem. So just look at it carefully and make sure you read the little tiny arrows that lead you into where the part goes and which way it's orientated, which way round it is. But as I say, it's not as clear as it could be, and there are very, very few locating pins on wherever you're putting it. And the ones that are there are very, very shallow and very, you see that one there, those two, they are big ones. For this kit, they're really big ones. So the tiny things. So put it all together, and then I was looking at it and I thought, do you know what, they've gone to all that detail and not supplied the fuel pipes off the top of the fuel pump into the heads. So I thought, right, I'm not having that, and I've done them myself. So I don't know if you can see that. Let's see if I can get it in a bit closer. Of course you can. So little bits of copper wire, cut the top off the fuel pump where the pipe nozzles come out, if you like, cut those off, put a little piece of plastic, you should be able to see it, at the back there, and then drilled out with one of these. I'm sure you've seen them in the past. You can buy a pack of 10. I bought these a few years ago when I first started building the kits, so it's probably about 4, maybe 5 years ago, and I bought what I thought was one pack of 10 tiny little drills. What I actually bought was 10 packs of 10 tiny little drills, so I'm still on the first one. It'll last me until I pop off, won't it? So once I've got the piece of plastic in at the back there, then drilled tiny little holes, I think that's 0.5 millimetre, into the top of the fuel pipe pumps there, and tiny little holes in the heads, and then fed the copper wire through, bend it round. It looks fairly realistic. So that's where that's up to. I've not put the fan on yet. It goes on this end. You see there, the fan, there's no locating no locating pin for it at all. There's nothing there at all. And if I remember rightly, for this whole section there were no locating pins. You just had to put it in where you thought it was the right place. It's easy enough. It's not, you know, it's not difficult, but as I say, if you're not careful, you can end up with stuff upside down. And the proof of the pudding is this plate here, which mounts on the back of the engine there, and then goes with the flywheel, goes the bell housing, goes on the back of it, bolts onto the back of it. And instead of putting it on that way up, because I wasn't paying attention, I had it the other way up. Of course, you don't realise you've done that until the glue, excuse me, until the glue is set and you couldn't put the next part on, and that's when I had to take it back off again, which wasn't an easy job, and put it back on the correct way round. And it was when I realised that the starter motor going into the bell housing was in the wrong place, had to be turned over. The radiator goes together really easily, nothing complex about that at all. That sits together really easily, and that is one radiator. Yeah. But again, very detailed. Look at the detail on that. Yeah, it's really nice, isn't it? So that's the radiator. Little pressure pop at the top, and there's your filler where you put your water in. If I'm not mistaken, these used to have a temperature gauge sat right on the top of it, so the driver could see it looking out of his windscreen. You could see the temperature gauge on top of the radiator, but this one doesn't seem to have one. On the other side of the on the other side of the engine, I think I've explained everything I've done there. On the other side of the engine, there's some PE bits all the way along here. Now I don't mind PE, I said that in the last video. Let's wind this back out again. Wrong way. There we go. And they go between the intake and the exhaust manifold. There's 6 of them all the way along there. And they are tiny little things. I bent 2, so at that point I decided it's just not worth doing it anymore. So what I've done is I've replaced that with a strip of plastic right the way along the top, and before I paint it I will cut that so that it emulates the little PE bits on the instructions. I've done all the PE. I've never thrown a piece of PE away, I don't think, but that I just couldn't get it there at all. And in fact you can see all the glue, super glue, where I've tried to glue it on. It's a bit shiny on the above the plastic there. Yep, there you go, you can see it there now. I must have used a bottle of super glue trying to get that sorted. And of course once you start messing around like that, you start to lose the accuracy, because you're getting so much glue on it. So if I were you, I'd take a look at that PE that's going on there and maybe try one piece, and if you can't get one piece on, you won't get the rest on, and just chuck them in a bin and cut some plastic, glue it on, then cut it off to suit. That's what I'm going to do anyway. Starter motor, that went in quite easily, no problem with that. And a couple of bits of PE on the other side of the engine underneath here. Yeah, can you see them? Yeah, and that's about the size. In fact, they're bigger than the ones that I was expected to put on the other side of the engine. A little piece of PE sitting on the top of the water pump there. And what else is there? Not a lot. And the instructions here seem to go a bit weird. For my liking, they seem to go a bit weird anyway. They go from here, doing all of this on the engine, putting all of the engine all together, and then go on to putting the engine mounting and the front suspension together. Then it goes, so I've done that, I'll come to that again in a second or two. It then goes from there to putting the gearbox on the back of the engine, which, you know, you would have done that first, I'm sure. And then from the gearbox it goes to putting the back of the the chassis in. I'm sure it'll all work out. I'm sure there's a reason for it, but at the moment I can't work that reason out. I'll get there. So moving on to the front suspension and the engine mounting. Quite easy, really quite easy, and it tells you where and where not to glue. And the hubs, the axle hubs, stub axles if you like, it says no glue. Fair enough, so you don't glue them, and indeed there they are. They don't have any glue on them. It then goes on to say that you should put this piece on, which is the steering linkage, and it goes through the chassis members, as the suspension member, through there, and it's this piece here, and it's very, very fragile, so I'm going to replace that. I was going to replace it with a piece of brass rod, but it's a bit small for soldering, and I was going to have to try and fix a piece of brass rod to these hub axles, and there's no way of doing it. So when this goes through, feed it through there, feed it through there, the other side, it then goes on to tell you to glue it to the stub axles. And of course then once you've glued it to the stub axles, all that delicate work that you did trying to keep them so that they would move has just gone down the tubes, because as soon as you glue it on there, they won't move anymore. So what I'm proposing to do is it's going to go on to a diorama, and when I work out the exact angle that I want the steering to be turned in, then I'll fix that in place, glue it in place. Most of the rest of it on there, the suspension, goes in quite easily, and it sits on the chassis like so. And when it's on there, sorry, other way up, when it's on there, they were renowned for their ability to get into a rough ground. It will turn like that. That whole suspension unit will turn like that. Yeah, and again, none of that would be glued together, and it would be fixed in place. So that's that. Little spring at the front with a towing hook on it. Little winch cables here on the side, and they come up on this page. Yes, they do. And it's these two here, these two components here. And what you need to do is you need to fiddle around with this one. It says there's two arrows that go to it, clearly say put it there, and it doesn't just fit there. You've got to jiggle it around and see exactly where it fits, then file a little bit off it, put it into that position, and then glue it into place. And what it's for is a cable would run through, and then it would be directed in this direction or that direction. So it would run through those two rollers and then into these two rollers and go in either direction. So that's what that's for, even though it only looks tiny on there. And that's about that for that. So that's it. There's nothing more. The only thing I'm going to do with this is I'm going to replace this tie rod here. I'm going to replace it with something a bit more substantial, and I might use a piece of 2mm plastic rod and glue it on each end. That's about it. There's no more. Thanks very much for watching. Any questions, any comments, please leave them in the boxes below. It would be great if you could like and subscribe to the channel, and it'd be great if you could share the video. Look forward to seeing you next time. Ta-da!